I woke up that Saturday morning thinking it would be just another lazy weekend. Coffee in hand, slippers on, ready to finally take my truck out for a drive and enjoy the peace of my neighborhood. But as soon as I stepped outside, my jaw dropped, my coffee almost spilled, and for a second I thought I'd woken up in some weird parallel universe. Right there, smack in the middle of my road, was a massive gate. Not just any gate like one you'd see on a mansion, but a full-on, armored-looking metal gate stretching across my neighborhood street. And if that wasn't enough, a bright sign glared at me, "Private Road, HOA Members Only." I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and blinked again. My road, my home, my road, I pay taxes here. Who even gave the HOA the idea that they could just plop a gate and block me in? I took a cautious step closer, like maybe, just maybe, it was some kind of optical illusion. Nope, solid steel, and there it was staring me in the face like a suburban villain. I could feel my blood pressure rising. My mind raced through the possibilities. Did I miss a memo? Did everyone in the neighborhood sign some secret HOA contract and forget to tell me? Are they seriously trying to turn my street into some gated fortress? Panic and disbelief hit at the same time. I was trapped, or at least it felt like it. I ran back inside and dialed my friend Mike. Mike's a cop, the kind of guy who has seen every type of petty villainy the world can throw at a citizen. I knew if anyone could handle this HOA nonsense, it would be him. "Mike, you're not going to believe this," I said, trying to keep my voice calm but failing miserably. "Someone blocked my road, someone built a gate, overnight on MY Street." He paused, then laughed. "Let me guess, HOA." I could practically hear the smirk through the phone. "Yes, how did you know? Did the HOA send out a memo to all cops saying, 'Target this one guy for fun'?" "Trust me," he said, "this is bold even for them. I've seen HOA drama before, but this takes the cake." By the time he arrived, I had circled the block like 3 times, trying to figure out how a suburban paper-pushing group suddenly thought they were owning the road. Mike pulled up in his car, calm as ever, sunglasses on, radiating that confident cop energy that makes anyone who crosses him reconsider their life choices. We approached the gate slowly. I could already see the HOA board members standing nearby, clipboards in hand, looking smug like they were about to win a Pulitzer for most ridiculous authority grab of the year. They waved us off, all smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my tone civil but firm. "This is my road, you can't just block it." One of them pointed to the sign like it was some magical decree. "Private road," they said, "members only." I couldn't help but laugh nervously. "I live here, I'm a member. Last I checked, owning property on this street still counts for something." Mike stepped forward, calm, collected, but his presence alone made them shift uncomfortably. He started quoting city ordinances, local laws, and homeowner rights like a walking, talking legal encyclopedia. Suddenly, the smiles disappeared, replaced by confusion, panic, and maybe a tiny hint of fear. And just when I thought the situation couldn't get any stranger, I noticed it. A small camera pointed directly at me from the gate. The HOA wasn't just blocking the road, they were monitoring me. Every move, every word, every frustrated sigh. I swallowed hard. I realized this wasn't going to be a simple talk-it-out situation. They were serious, they wanted control, they wanted chaos, and apparently I was the main character in their little suburban drama. Mike glanced at me, raised an eyebrow, and whispered, "Ready to have a little fun?" I nodded, heart racing. "Oh, I'm ready, let's see how far they'll go." As we walked closer to the gate, the board members exchanged nervous glances. Their confidence faltered with every step we took. I could almost hear them thinking, "Who let this guy live here?" And just like that, I realized this was only the beginning. The battle for my road had begun, and the HOA had no idea what was coming. I could feel my pulse racing as Mike and I stood in front of that ridiculous gate. The HOA board members were there, looking like they'd been caught red-handed. Clipboards in hand, the self-proclaimed rulers of the neighborhood, the tiny tyrants of suburban chaos trying to stare us down. I swear, if glares could physically block someone, I'd still be stuck on my side of the road. "Okay," Mike said calmly, "let's see what we're dealing with." And just like that, his calmness did something to them. Their smug little smiles started to twitch nervously. The president of the HOA, a man in a polo shirt tucked into khakis, stepped forward. He held up his clipboard like a shield. "Sir, ma'am, this is a private road. You have no right to be here." I laughed, partly out of disbelief and partly out of frustration. "I live here, I pay taxes here, my driveway is literally attached to this street, I think that counts as a right." He frowned like I'd just insulted the very fabric of the universe. You don't understand, the HOA rules." Mike leaned in, his tone calm but authoritative. Actually, we understand perfectly. And here's the thing, this road is public, blocking it is illegal, threatening fines or towing a resident's car is also illegal. I watched their confidence crumble line by line. Their faces went from smug to pale to straight-up panic, and all the while I felt a weird mix of adrenaline and satisfaction. I'd been ready to argue, ready to fight paper and bureaucracy, but Mike made it easy. One of the younger board members whispered something to another. I caught bits of it. Maybe we should call the city attorney. Mike smiled, just a slight, calm smile, and it sent shivers down their spines. It was like he didn't even have to raise his voice. The power of a badge and knowledge was frightening. I decided to stir the pot a little. So let me get this straight. You all just built a gate overnight, blocked my road, put up a sign, and somehow thought no one would notice? That's bold. The board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered, "We just wanted to control traffic." Mike gave me a look, a kind of keep-going look, and I continued. Control traffic? Oh, so that's what this is about. Let me guess, the mailman needed supervision, and the neighbor's dog needed an HOA-approved walking schedule. Some of the board members gasped. I think it was a mix of embarrassment and disbelief that someone dared mock their tiny empire. I couldn't stop grinning. Then the HOA president, now clearly flustered, pointed at Mike. You're not even a resident, you can't just. Mike cut him off, calm as a lake at midnight. I don't need to be a resident, I just need to know the law, and the law clearly says you have no right to block this road. Now step aside before this escalates. The tension was electric. I could feel it in my chest. Every fiber of my body was ready for the board to throw a tantrum, but instead they hesitated. They looked at each other, whispering, panicked. Then something surprising happened. One of the board members, a woman in pearls and sensible shoes, took a step forward, pointing at the gate. Maybe we just call someone a lawyer. Mike's expression didn't change. Calm, confident, I swear he could have told them to jump in a pool fully clothed and they'd have considered it. I decided to push a little further. Or we could do this the easy way. Open the gate, let me through, and nobody has to make awkward phone calls or explain this to city officials. The silence was deafening. I could practically hear their brains scrambling, recalculating the disaster they'd just created, and I realized we had them cornered without lifting a finger. Just as I started to feel a glimmer of victory, I noticed movement behind the gate, someone reaching for a phone again. My stomach dropped. Were they calling the cops, the city attorney, or plotting something even more ridiculous to escalate this HOA drama? Mike glanced at me, eyebrow raised, ready for round 2. I swallowed hard, adrenaline surging. Let's see how far they'll go. I realized in that moment this was no longer about a blocked road. It was a battle of wills, and I wasn't backing down, and neither was Mike. The HOA board wasn't going to let this slide quietly, I could tell. Their faces were a mix of panic, disbelief, and that weird kind of self-righteous indignation only suburban rulers of nothing truly possess. They huddled together like tiny generals plotting a defense against me. Step aside, Mike said calmly, as if he were talking to toddlers, and in a way he was. The president of the HOA, Mr. Thompson, shuffled forward with a thick folder clutched in both hands like it was Excalibur itself. We have all the documentation proving that this is a private road. You have no right. Mike didn't even flinch. He leaned over and started scanning the papers, his expression neutral, professional, terrifying. I watched as Mr. Thompson's confident posture slowly collapsed into a nervous shuffle. I couldn't resist adding my 2 cents. Let me get this straight. You built a gate overnight, blocked my road, put up a camera to watch me, and now you have a folder to justify it? This is real life. The younger board members fidgeted, some hiding behind clipboards, others whispering, trying not to make eye contact. One muttered, maybe we call a lawyer. Mike glanced at me, eyebrow raised. I nodded slightly, silently telling him, do your thing. And then he did. He started quoting city ordinances, municipal codes, and homeowners' rights like he was reciting Shakespeare. Every line made them shrink a little more, their eyes darting between folders, phones, and each other. I could feel the tension building, the kind of tension that makes your stomach tighten and your pulse race. I wanted to laugh, but this was serious, or at least serious for them. I added humor where I could. So let me see if I understand, your plan was to fine me for walking to my own mailbox. A few board members blinked. One whispered something like, did he just? Mike didn't miss a beat. Calmly he said, the law is clear, public road, you cannot block it, you cannot threaten fines for access, anything else is overreach. I could see the panic start to settle in like a storm cloud. Their tiny little world of control was crumbling and they knew it. I almost felt sorry for them, almost. Then, as if on cue, a board member reached for their phone. My stomach dropped. Were they calling someone to escalate this further? Another lawyer, another bureaucrat? Mike noticed too. He leaned slightly closer to me, whispered, "Watch this." The president slammed his folder on the table again. You can't just. Actually, we can, Mike said calmly. You built a gate without approval, you're blocking a public road, you are liable for damages if anyone gets hurt. I suggest you reconsider your next move. I swear you could hear a pin drop. The board members were frozen, mouths slightly open like deer in headlights, and in that moment I realized the power dynamic had shifted completely. I decided to press the advantage. Maybe we can settle this like adults, I said, voice steady but firm. You remove the gate, everyone walks away, no one needs to make awkward phone calls, and my driveway stays intact. Seems fair, right? Some of them blinked rapidly, others whispered frantically to each other. I caught snippets. We can't just maybe call City Hall. What if he? Mike gave a slight nod. That was my cue to keep the pressure on. Or you can escalate this, make it messy, and risk fines, legal fees, and a lawsuit. Up to you. The president's face turned red. He looked like he was about to explode. The Pearls and Shoes board member clutched her clipboard like a life preserver. The younger members looked like they were ready to bolt. And just as I thought we had the upper hand, the unthinkable happened. The president stomped his foot louder than I expected and shouted, "We're not opening that gate." My heart raced, adrenaline surged. This was it. The real confrontation was about to begin. Mike and I exchanged a glance, calm, collected, but ready for the battle ahead. I could feel the suspense building like a tight rope stretched over a canyon. Every second felt like an eternity. The HOA had drawn their line in the sand, and now we were about to push them to their breaking point. The board member was moving toward the gate like he had some kind of plan, or maybe he just wanted to assert dominance. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that my stomach had tied itself into a knot, adrenaline pumping through every vein. Mike's hand rested lightly on his belt, not threatening, just calmly ready. That's when I realized this was no longer just a road dispute. This was a showdown. "Stop," Mike called out, his voice calm but sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. The board member froze mid-step, eyes wide, clearly reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. I took a deep breath and decided to talk, mostly to distract myself from the panic creeping up my spine. "So let me understand this," I said, voice steady but biting. "You blocked a public road, installed a camera, and think you can scare me into submission." The HOA president sputtered, searching for words. "We were protecting the neighborhood." "Protecting the neighborhood from what?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Traffic, children walking, mail carriers, or maybe from me daring to exist?" Mike chuckled quietly, but only I noticed. That small, calm laugh did more damage than any argument could. Their faces were now an awkward mix of panic and embarrassment. They could feel their tiny empire collapsing right in front of them. One of the younger board members whispered something frantically to the president. Maybe we just call the city." Mike didn't miss a beat. "The city has already made it clear. Public road, you have no authority here, step aside." I watched their confidence crumble line by line. They shifted weight from one foot to the other. Clipboards trembled in their hands. One of them, pearls glinting in the sun, muttered, "We didn't think he'd," and trailed off. I laughed nervously because honestly, it was absurd. They built a gate, spent who knows how much money, and now we're realizing that laws aren't suggestions. Mike leaned in slightly, almost whispering so only they could hear. "The moment anyone tries to block a public road, it's considered illegal. Any damages, any inconvenience, any fines you try to levy, you'll be held accountable." You could literally see the panic setting in. Their little kingdom of control had no foundation, no authority, and Mike was calmly exposing it to the sunlight. Then out of nowhere, one of the board members made a move. He reached toward his phone like he was going to call someone. My heart stopped. Was he calling a lawyer, the cops, a neighbor for backup? Mike stepped forward, calm but firm, and the man froze mid-reach. "I'd think carefully before you make that call," Mike said, voice low. "Anything you do from this point forward is on you, understand?" I could see it in their eyes. Fear, confusion, the realization that maybe, just maybe, they had overplayed their hand. I decided to push a little further. "We could make this easy. You remove the gate, step back, and we walk away without anyone losing face. Or you escalate and you're responsible for every fine, lawsuit, and legal headache that follows, your choice." The room was silent. The hum of tension was almost deafening. I swear I could hear my own heartbeat in the air. They glanced at each other like scared kids caught in the act of stealing cookies from the jar. The president finally spoke, voice shaky, You can't just. Mike cut him off without raising his voice. Actually, we can. You've broken the law. This is your chance to correct it peacefully. Otherwise, his gaze was steady, cold, unyielding. I could feel the weight of authority in his words. I watched them shrink back, clipboards trembling. Their tiny kingdom of HOA control was collapsing, and all they could do was whisper to each other in panic. Then, as if on cue, the president stomped his foot again, this time harder, and barked, We are not opening that gate. My stomach lurched. The tension had reached a fever pitch. I knew we were moments away from full-blown chaos, or at the very least, some seriously awkward HOA humiliation. Mike glanced at me, calm but ready. I nodded, adrenaline surging. I realized in that moment this was not about a road anymore. It was about pride, power, and the illusion of authority, and I was about to watch it all crumble. The HOA member who had been inching toward the gate suddenly froze mid-step, and I could feel the tension in the air like static electricity. Mike leaned slightly closer to me and whispered, Watch this, they have no idea what's coming. I grinned. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. We weren't just going to argue or yell. No, Mike had a plan, a tactical, perfectly legal plan that would make even the most confident HOA members sweat bullets. Step 1, make them realize that their gate, their authority, and their little kingdom of control meant nothing. Step 2, make them open it. Step 3, make them run, figuratively. Mike reached into his bag and pulled out a city map. He spread it out across the hood of my truck. The HOA members, who had been jittery already, leaned in, curiosity mixed with fear. Mike traced the public roads, the easements, and the boundaries. See this? He said calmly. Every inch of this road is public property. You built a gate overnight. That makes this illegal. I couldn't help adding my own commentary, half to entertain myself, half to embarrass them. And just to clarify, you did this without telling anyone, without approval, and without, well, permission. Bold move. The president's face turned red. You don't understand the HOA rules, he stammered. I laughed, partly out of disbelief. Rules? You mean the imaginary rules that allow you to bully neighbors and hide behind clipboards? Yeah, those rules, very scary. Mike ignored me, keeping his calm, professional demeanor. He continued, pointing to the map. Any attempt to block a public road, levy fines, or intimidate residents is unlawful. Any damages resulting from your gate or any obstruction, that's on you. I watched their confidence crumble line by line. Clipboards trembled in shaky hands. Whispering erupted among them like a secret panic meeting. I could almost hear their thoughts. We didn't think anyone would fight back. We didn't expect this. Then came the highlight. One of the HOA members, pearls glinting in the sun, muttered, We can't just we caw. Mike raised an eyebrow, calm, measured, terrifying. You can, but you'll be held accountable. It's your choice. I couldn't resist adding a little flair. Or we could do this the easy way. Open the gate, let me through, and we all walk away without anyone calling lawyers or city officials. Seems fair, right? The silence that followed was almost deafening. You could feel the weight of their tiny little egos crushing down, realizing that their authority had no teeth. And then, as if on cue, the president stomped his foot again, this time harder, louder, trying to assert dominance. We're not opening that gate. My heart raced. That was the last straw. The next move was crucial. I glanced at Mike, and he nodded ever so slightly. He had the calm, confident energy of a person who knows exactly what will happen next. He stepped toward the gate, unfazed, and spoke slowly, deliberately, making every word land like a hammer. You're standing on a public road. Any obstruction, any fines, any threats, all of it is illegal. Step aside or you'll be responsible for every consequence. The board members froze, their whispering stopped. Their shaking hands gripped clipboards tighter. Their faces were pale, and for a moment I felt like a kid watching the bullies in a playground finally realize they picked the wrong fight. I leaned in, smiling, and added, and just so we're clear, I'm not alone. Mike knows the law and I live here. You can either open the gate or, well, you'll find out what happens next. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Their tiny kingdom of control, their sense of superiority was collapsing, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Then suddenly, the Pearls and Shoes board member gasped. One of them whispered to the president, maybe we should just open it. The president's jaw tightened. He looked like he was about to explode. And then for the first time I saw hesitation, real, palpable fear. This was it. The HOA, the supposed rulers of the neighborhood, were on the edge. Their bluff had been called. They had no backup, no real power, no plan. And the realization hit them like a brick wall. The tension was unbearable. The president had disappeared behind the gate, muttering under his breath. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, adrenaline surging. I knew this wasn't over, far from it. Mike glanced at me, calm and confident as always, and gave a tiny nod. It was time for the final face-off. I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. Okay, let's do this, time's up. Either you open the gate or we escalate this legally, politely, and with consequences you won't enjoy. The board members peeked out from behind their clipboards, eyes wide. Their confident postures had crumbled entirely. They looked like deer caught in headlights, but the president, he still had that stubborn spark in his eyes, the one that screamed, I'm not backing down even if I'm terrified. Mike, as usual, didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Calm, measured, authoritative, just that presence alone made them shuffle backward, clipboards trembling in their hands. You have zero authority to block this road, he said. Your gate, your fines, your threats, all of it is invalid. Step aside now. I could see the panic spreading. Their whispered conversations had become frantic gestures and pointed fingers. The younger members looked ready to bolt. The pearls and shoes woman kept clutching her clipboard like a life raft, and the president, he was packing now, muttering about rules, ordinances, and imaginary bylaws. I decided to add a little extra pressure. Look, we don't want trouble, you don't want trouble, but if you continue this nonsense, you're going to be the ones explaining everything to city officials, and believe me, they won't be as patient as Mike. The words landed like a hammer. I could see their faces turn pale. That tiny kingdom they'd tried to build, all that power was crumbling before them. Then something hilarious and perfect happened. One board member, clearly flustered, whispered loudly enough for all of us to hear, maybe we should call a lawyer. Mike didn't miss a beat. Calmly, he said, you can call anyone you want, but the law doesn't change. This is a public road, you have no authority here. The board members exchanged panicked glances. I could practically see the wheels turning. We built a gate overnight. We installed a camera. We thought we had control, but now we're in way over our heads. I decided to press the advantage. Or you could just open the gate, let me through, and nobody has to make any embarrassing calls or explanations. Seems easy enough, right? One by one, I saw them hesitate. The president's jaw tightened. He looked like he was about to argue, and then something miraculous happened. Mike stepped forward, pointed at the map we'd used earlier, and said, this is your opportunity to do the right thing. Step aside, open the gate, avoid unnecessary legal consequences, your choice. The president froze. I swear you could hear the wind change direction. He looked around at his board, at their nervous whispers, at their trembling clipboards, and realized they had no plan, no backup, no authority. Their bluff had been called. I could barely contain my excitement. I leaned in slightly, smiling. I think we've reached the part of the story where you figure out that maybe, just maybe, we aren't bluffing. The silence was deafening. Their tiny empire built on fear and paper was collapsing. The younger members avoided eye contact. Pearls and Shoes woman slowly put down her clipboard like surrendering a weapon. And finally the president exhaled a long, shaky breath and muttered, fine, we'll open it. I felt like I'd just won a war I didn't even sign up for. Mike nodded at me, satisfaction barely contained in his calm demeanor. The gate slowly creaked open, sunlight flooding the street I hadn't been able to drive down for what felt like forever. I couldn't help laughing, not maniacally, but the kind of laugh that comes from realizing you've outsmarted people who thought rules didn't apply to them. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, welcome back to reality. This is a public road. You're free to go about your lives without trying to run my neighborhood like a dictatorship. They shuffled inside, muttering apologies and promises, but I could tell, the moment they realized just how badly they'd underestimated us would stay with them forever. The gate was open. I could drive my truck freely down my own road. The sunlight streamed across the asphalt, and for a split second I felt victorious, the kind of small-town hero energy that makes you grin like you've just won an Oscar for Best Neighborhood Justice. But even as I stepped onto the street, my eyes caught that black SUV at the entrance of the neighborhood. Engine running, windows tinted, nobody inside visible. Someone was still watching, still scheming. I swallowed hard. Victory, it seemed, was only partial. Mike, ever calm, glanced at me and whispered, stay sharp, this isn't over yet. I followed him as we drove slowly down the street, casually, like nothing was wrong. The HOA members were scattered, whispering, muttering, trying to reclaim some sense of dignity after what had just happened. The Pearls and Shoes woman avoided eye contact completely. The younger members shuffled like guilty kids. And the president, he looked like someone who had just realized he'd lost the biggest game of his life. I couldn't resist a little jab. So, anyone want to explain the whole gate thing, or are we just pretending this never happened? He sputtered, eyes darting, trying to find words. Mike didn't let him off the hook either. Calmly, he said, "You broke the law, you obstructed a public road, you installed surveillance equipment without authorization. The fines, threats, and intimidation stop here, understood?" The president nodded slowly. I could see the realization in his eyes. The humbling hit him harder than any lecture could have. Their little kingdom of control had crumbled, and the only thing left was damage control. As I drove past, the black SUV's engine roared to life. My stomach dropped for just a moment, but Mike's calm presence kept me steady. "Probably someone from City Hall, or maybe another HOA member trying to see what's happening," he said. I laughed nervously, "Or maybe they're calling in reinforcements for another gate." Mike shook his head, smirking. "If they do, we'll deal with it, but trust me, they won't. They just realize they can't win against someone who knows their rights and has a little backup." I glanced back at the HOA office, watching the board members scurry like ants trying to hide crumbs of dignity. I had never seen people so simultaneously embarrassed and panicked, and honestly, it was beautiful. I parked my truck in front of my house, turned to Mike and said, "I think we actually won this." He smiled, a small, satisfied smile. "Yeah, for now, but remember, power-hungry HOA members are never done, they just look for the next battle." I leaned back against the truck, heart still pounding. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The absurdity of the whole situation was insane. I mean, who gets this worked up over a road, a gate, surveillance cameras, only an HOA, only them. I thought about all the ridiculous conversations we'd had that morning. Threats, paperwork, stomped feet, whispered phone calls. It was a surreal, almost cinematic scene that I knew I'd tell friends about for years. But just as I started to relax, I noticed the SUV had moved slightly. A shadow behind the tinted window shifted. My heart skipped a beat. Was this over? Was someone plotting retaliation? The suspense made me realize the HOA might have surrendered the road, but someone was still watching, waiting for their moment. I turned to Mike, who was already scanning the street, calm as ever. "Ready for the next chapter?" I asked. He laughed quietly. "Always, but for now, let them stew. They've learned a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the wrong resident and don't underestimate someone who knows the law." I couldn't stop grinning. The tension, the panic, the absurdity of the whole situation, it was a story for the ages. I knew I'd remember this battle for the rest of my life. And more importantly, I knew the neighborhood had witnessed something rare, an HOA humbled. I leaned against my truck, watching the black SUV finally drive away, engine rumbling, tail lights disappearing into the distance. Victory was mine, but the lingering suspense, the what if, kept me alert, just in case. And as I walked toward my front door, I realized something. Standing up for your rights isn't just satisfying, it's empowering. The HOA may have tried to control me, but I had the law, my courage, and Mike on my side. And sometimes, that's more than enough to make even the most confident bullies run. The faint beep from the HOA gate's alarm made me freeze. Just when I thought the chaos was over, it reminded me that the HOA's drama wasn't fully finished. My pulse jumped. Part of me wanted to ignore it, walk inside, and pretend the entire morning hadn't been a war zone, but something told me I needed to check. Mike leaned casually against my truck, still calm as ever. "Let's see what they're up to," he said, voice low, eyes scanning the street like a hawk. I followed him to the gate. The alarm was loud enough to be annoying, but not threatening. Whoever said it clearly wanted to keep some illusion of control, but after everything that had happened, it felt more like a sad little whimper than a threat. I couldn't help but laugh. Seriously, an alarm? I shook my head. They're lucky I'm in a good mood today. Mike smirked. "They're probably hopping, it'll scare you. It won't, they're out of moves." I stepped up to the gate, pressed the override button, and watched the alarm die down. My street was mine again. My truck could drive freely. The sunlight hit the asphalt, warm and victorious. It felt like I was claiming territory in a battle I'd fought and won, a small, suburban battlefield, but a battlefield nonetheless. I glanced back at the HOA office. The board members were nowhere to be seen. The president, Pearls and Shoes woman, the younger members, all had retreated into hiding. Their empire of fear had crumbled, and they had no idea what to do next. I leaned on the truck, feeling the adrenaline slowly fade. "You know," I said to Mike, "this is absurd. Who blocks a road? Who installs a camera to watch neighbors? Only an HOA." Mike laughed quietly. "Only an HOA, and only the ones that forget that rules, laws, and reality exist outside their little bubble." I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The morning had started with a shocking discovery, a gate blocking my road, and ended with a clear victory. The HOA had learned the hard way: you can't bully residents who know their rights, especially when they have a friend like Mike. I climbed into my truck and started driving down the road, fully reclaiming my territory. I waved at a neighbor walking their dog, finally free to enjoy the street without ridiculous gates or imaginary laws. I could feel the tension release with every turn of the wheel, every breath of fresh air. As I drove, I thought about how absurd it all had been. The whispered phone calls, the stomped feet, the clipboards trembling in their hands. It was surreal, almost cinematic, almost like a story that needed to be told. I parked in front of my house, shut off the engine, and finally let myself relax. Victory wasn't just about reclaiming the road, it was about standing up for myself, about taking control, about showing that even the most confident HOA bullies can be humbled. Mike clapped me on the shoulder. Lesson learned for them and for you. I laughed. Always expect the unexpected and never underestimate a cop friend with patience. The sunlight glinted off my truck, the road stretched out clear and open, and for the first time all day I felt peace. My neighborhood was mine again, and the HOA's tiny little power trip was over, at least for now. But even as I walked inside, I knew this story would be told and retold. Friends, neighbors, future homeowners, everyone would know about the day the HOA tried to block my road and failed spectacularly. And the best part, I had the receipts. Photos of the gate, the alarm, their trembling faces, their whispers, their panic, every ridiculous attempt at control documented, a story for the ages. A reminder that sometimes courage, knowledge, and a little backup are all it takes to win. I leaned back in my chair, sipping coffee finally, and smiled. The HOA had tried to control the street, they had failed, and I had won fair, legal, and with just enough humor to make the whole situation unforgettable. Final cliffhanger tease for humor: just as I was about to relax completely, my phone buzzed. A new email from the HOA president. Subject line: next meeting agenda. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. Apparently, even after being humbled, they weren't giving up entirely. But for now, the road was mine, the gate was gone, and the story was one for the ages. Victory, justice, humor, drama, and the unforgettable feeling of telling the HOA exactly who's boss. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.